I'm so glad to be with you on this wonderful July Sunday. My name is Reverend Dr. Alice Reid, and I'm the spiritual director here at the Center for Spiritual Living, Capistrano Valley. And this year, we have this beautiful theme that we're exploring, Open at the Top, and that comes from the founder of this philosophy, which is just one part of the New Thought movement, Ernest Holmes. And he was famous to say that this philosophy is open at the top. That there's no one person, one authority for our spiritual growth, that our spiritual development and growth and evolution is forever expanding. So what a great landscape for us to spend time with in 2026. And this month, as we're looking at themes throughout that idea of open at the top, we're looking at wholeness. And we're talking about this idea that life is whole no matter what, just as it is. Now, if you're experiencing some form of disappointment, if life isn't meeting you where you would like it to meet, that might sound like positive thinking, or might even resemble some toxic positivity. And I want to assure you that this philosophy is not about glossing over the things that we don't like. It's not about pretending that we aren't having difficulties, but it is about witnessing life from a different perspective. And so as we look at this idea of being whole no matter what, last week I spoke with you about this teaching. You might have gotten this silly little drawing with people, and it says the coach to everywhere. And so last week we talked about this coach to everywhere. We talked about the different components of it, and it's a lovely little teaching that sort of has a smattering of the Upanishads when they talked about the carriage of life that carries us through. And it has a smattering of Emma Curtis Hopkins, who is a wonderful teacher, and it has a smattering of Science of Mind, but it really speaks to this way we move through life. And so don't focus too much on it. I'm just going to touch on it a little bit, but because our slides don't work very well here, I wanted you to have a visual for this coach to everywhere. And there's more in the lobby if you didn't get to pick up at one. I also talked a little bit about the subtext from the Harry Potter series. Anybody familiar with the Harry Potter stories? You may not have read them. I don't know if I shared this last week, but I was dead set. I was not gonna, I'm a little bit of a rebel, and everybody was just going on and on about Harry Potter, and I'm like, I'm not gonna stand in line and wait for that next book. I'm not doing that. All 7 books were out, and finally I picked up the first one around the Sorcerer's Stone. I started it in mid-July and was finished by the end of August. All 7 books. Now, they are written for a younger audience, so it's a pretty easy read, but it's also very captivating because there's all this subtext within the stories, and I want to draw upon some of that subtext as we talked this week. Last week, we talked about Harry's origin story. He grew up with an aunt because his parents were killed, and when he was just a baby, and he was put with his normal family. They refer to normal as muggles, and if you're not a wizard, you're a muggle in the world of Harry Potter. And he grew up bullied and belittled and hidden under the cupboard under the stairs. And at his 11th birthday, he was rescued by the wizarding world, and so his adventures start. And so last week we talked about those hidden parts of ourselves that we were trained to keep under the proverbial cupboard under the stairs, and that it was important for us to integrate all parts of ourselves as we walk through this thing called life. That those unloved parts of us need to see the light of day as well. They need to be cared for so that they don't undermine us in our subjective and in the subconscious mind. And you were invited to acknowledge anything that came up for you there were subtle parts that you wanted to hide from others, to simply acknowledge them. Not to do anything, not try to fix it, but just to acknowledge it. And so and we talked about this coach to everywhere and the passengers in the backseat of your coach. Those passengers are those hidden thoughts, those hidden ideas in the subjective that we don't know are there, and they're continually directing us. It's like backseat drivers. Don't talk to him. Don't take that job. Take this job. You really need this to be whole. Like there's all these hidden ideas in our subjective that it's important for us to become aware of, or else they end up, or else they end up driving the bus, so to speak. And so we want to have a heightened awareness. And so this week, I want to talk about the neighbors. So in the little diagram, you see these tiny, tiny little guy in the back seat. He's our sort of error thoughts, the passengers. Well, the neighbors are on the path. They're outside of us. And those are our projections, right? Those are those places. If there's something in us that's hidden, if there's something in us that we're not aware of, we often project it outward into the world around us. And so it is those neglected parts that if we don't do the self-reflection work to bring them forward, to become conscious of them, to begin to dissolve them, well, they get louder and they show up as your teacher, maybe your literal neighbor, maybe a politician, maybe it's a lover or a friend or a relative. And so that we really can't get away from those subjective parts of ourselves. They will get louder until we pay attention. I'm sure I'm not the only one who have found themselves with a personality in their life and they just change names and faces and body parts and show up as somebody else. One boss, I quit a job because I was very uncomfortable with the boss, and I end up having another boss a couple years later who I'm dealing with the same kind of things. I have a friend who likes to put it this way. When you have these patterns that show up in your life, what's the common denominator? You. Yeah, absolutely. The common denominator is us. And so it behooves us to pay attention to those things that come up. And so this week's topic of who I am is perfect inside and out doesn't talk to the sort of the cultural idea of perfect. It talks about the coherence, that what we believe and what we think is so perfect that it must outpicture in our lives. And it outpictures in our experiences, and it outpictures in the way we see things. Because life is perfect. There is a law there's so many laws that speak to this. There's the law of coherence, there's the law of circulation, there's the law of I know, you can think of attraction. That's the one I was trying to grab. The law of attraction, absolutely. And so when we're looking at this idea of the coach to everywhere and these hidden beliefs, Holmes referred to it as our subjective mind, that part of us that instills beliefs within our psyche that begin to, I think one of his favorite lines, my favorite lines in the Science of Mind textbook that he wrote was, what you're looking with. What you're looking at, you're looking with. What you're looking at, you're looking with, and you're looking through. Like there's a perfection in this model of how we move through life and how our subjective mind continues to show up in different places. And so I want to remind you that those neighbors that we're talking about, those projections that we see, not only do they project the places that annoy you, but don't forget, you also have projections of grace. You also have projections of love that live inside you, that show up in the people around you. Like it works both ways. And so if we go back to our Harry Potter story, there's this great subtext in the story, and for those of you who aren't familiar with all the details of the story, I'll try to make it concise. Harry has the obvious nemesis, which is the evil wizard, but he has this other nemesis at Hogwarts school. You know, he finds out he's a wizard at 11. He goes to Hogwarts, and he meets Professor Severus Snape. And Professor Severus Snape he's dark. And he's, everything about him. He's got black hair. He wears, always wearing black. He's the potions master. And instantly he has this disdain for Harry. And Harry is sure that Snape is after him, wants to do him harm. And so they have this kind of mutual disdain for one another. And it's illustrated in the first story where he's obviously his broomstick is under a spell, and they're sure Snape is causing the spell. That's, surely he's going to die if that broomstick doesn't carry him through where he's flying. And you can see Snape, and he's moving his lips, and they're sure he's doing some kind of incantation that wizards do, And it turns out later that the incantation that he was doing was to protect Harry. And this is how our projections often work. We're in a relationship. We're making up something about what somebody else thinks about us. We're making up some kind of a story. I did it this morning. Like, it just continually happens. We have some kind of situation, and we make it about something that's wrong with somebody. That's a projection. It's something that lives inside of me that isn't quite settled, that I haven't made peace with. And so therefore, it gets projected out in the world around me and causes discomfort, it causes annoyance, makes us crazy. And so what I want to tell you about this little relationship with Snape and Harry Potter is that as I told you, Harry Potter was neglected and abused and bullied as a child. And at some point in Harry's story, he magically touches some of Snape's memories. And he witnesses Snape being neglected and bullied and unloved. And not only that, when Snape was going to school, he was bullied by Harry's enshrined beloved father, right? And so there's this complexity that comes up in this story that shows us how projection can work in our lives. It's sort of like, I know, it's not like we invite these things. It's not like you wake up in the morning and you say, I can't wait for so-and-so to annoy me today. Nobody does that. But it's a gift. It's a real gift when we can begin to see what it is that the universe is bringing forward for us, so that it's actually our soul that is calling us forward for greater clarity, for greater coherency, and for the healing and revealing that needs to come from within us. And so in the Harry Potter series, this Snape relationship, there's constant in each book. There's some kind of conflict that happens between these two. And it isn't until Harry recognizes himself in Snape that he begins to really mature, that he begins to really begin to see Snape man to man, as bullied child to bully child, as outcast to outcast. And it is in that healing that happens in the story where you see sort of the last scene, and if you haven't read the book, spoiler alert. And the last scene, Harry's grown up, he's married, he's putting his son onto the train to Hogwarts for the first time, and he introduces his son, and his name is Albus Severus Potter. He's actually named his son after Severus, and he tells his son that Severus Snape was the bravest man he ever knew. And so there you have it, this forgiveness and healing that is demonstrated in this beautiful story. And the other thing to point out about that is it's not as, it doesn't always happen in a tidy, neat way. Snape dies before, yes, really a spoiler alert. Snape dies before Harry has his healing. And that often happens to us. Somebody will leave your life in one form or another. Maybe they transition, maybe you move to another state, maybe you switch jobs. They'll leave your life, and the healing and the forgiveness doesn't happen until later. But I want to tell you, it's never too late. It's never too late to have that healing. And when you have that healing, when that healing and that forgiveness comes up within you, regardless of whether you heal that relationship, you've healed a part of you, because forgiveness is for you. It's not necessarily for the other person. That other person doesn't have to change at all. And when you experience forgiveness, well, there's no private good, because you have healed something in yourself. You have healed something in the whole subjective mind of the universe. Now, there's a wonderful, I'll call him a mystic. He's a healer and a teacher. His name is Prentice Hemphill, and he does a lot of work with inner family systems and parts work, if you will. And he talks about projections as masks, that oftentimes when we are projecting something, we end up superimposing a mask on someone else, and then we don't recognize ourselves. And he offers this idea that it is the integration of that projection where we can begin to drop those masks, when we can begin to be authentic and see ourselves authentically, then we see others authentically. It is an inside job when we do this healing. It has to start with you. It cannot start out there. It has to start here. There's this lovely line that I came across, and I wish I could tell you who the author was, but it's potent. You can't really meet a person until you stop meeting your own history in them. I want to repeat that. You can't really meet a person until you stop meeting your own history in them. That's what Prentice Hemphill is talking about. That's the subtext for the story of Harry Potter. And Ernest Holmes talks about this. If we want to take this right to principle, Ernest Holmes talks about this when he says things like, life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what he thinks into it. Yeah, I know. One of my mentors calls it the, I have to clean this up a little. She calls it the pain in the neck of consciousness. The pain in the neck of consciousness is that when you are seeing things around you that are really challenging you, unfortunately, there's something in us that needs to be healed, and it's not always obvious. It's not always, that person is a shoplifter, so you must be a shoplifter too. It isn't like that. It's subtle, especially for the new thought student, the person who's on the spiritual path to a greater evolution of themselves. Oftentimes, it's very subtle. So I'll share this brief story with you about a friend of mine who, and some of you have heard it before, but it's perfect for this point. She saw a scene in a television show where the commentator they had this beautiful model on the stage, and the commentator was using and he had a buddy with them, and they both had laser pointers, and they were pointing out all the woman's flaws, and it really upset her. She carried it around for days. she wasn't, and it was all about the other person. She was completely, upset, what the hell these men think they are, they're objectifying women, they're all that stuff that some of us carry too. Until one day she was getting ready for work and she was putting her makeup on, and it was as if she had a laser pointer at the mirror and she was pointing out all her own flaws. And it suddenly came home to her why she was so upset. Now, there was definitely something to not be happy about in that scene, but and it was Howard Stern, because you know how abrasive that guy could be. So it wasn't that was okay, but it was that she figured out what was living in her that energized and triggered her, right? She wasn't an objectifying women. She wasn't a womanizer. But there was some part of her that was reflected back to her in that experience. And so this is where I hope this gives you permission when you're seeing somebody who's doing something that's really making you crazy or annoying you or making you angry. It doesn't mean that, you're the child abuser. It doesn't mean that you're the thief. But there might be something your soul wants to tease out, something within you that is calling you forth to be in your greater wholeness and perfection. And that is how this philosophy works. And so my invitation to you this week is, I'm going to bet that at least once this week, you will come across somebody, it might be in the news, it might be in the grocery store, it might be in your own home, who will annoy the hell out of you. They'll get under your skin. Heck, it might even happen before lunch today. And so I'm going to invite you, rather than to go right to judgment, to maybe do a little reflection, something really simple. You don't have to fix it. It's about our observation and our acknowledgement. Ask yourself, what is my soul trying to tell me in this situation? What is the gift hidden in this unlikely package? And if you're a journaler, that's a great place to ask yourself what your life might be like if you could just authentically see your part, however subtle it might be, in these relationships, so that you can bring your greater perfection, your wholeness into that relationship, and be part of that greater good that happens when we heal something within ourselves. It's such worthy work, and you deserve it. You deserve to love all the parts of you that you thought weren't lovable. You deserve to see God in everyone you come to meet. The world needs that. And so my invitation to you is to take those little baby steps. Honor those things that come up for you. See what it is that's calling you forth so that you can truly live in wholeness and perfection. Thank you very much. So we have this little thing called affirmative prayer. And so I'm going to invite you to join me by closing your eyes or lowering your gaze as Ernest Holmes would famously say, speak the word. And I know this is for me. I know this is for each one. I know this is for the world, that there is indeed a power and a presence that is forever pouring itself into life in such expected and unexpected ways. And so I trust that for each one, we are open and available to the greater good that is always coming forth for us. I trust that each one walks through this week with their eyes open, with their awareness heightened, listening deeply to the soul's call in every situation. And I trust that as each one moves through their relationships and their different situations and conditions and effects and things that are happening throughout the week, whether they're in the personal realm or whether they're out in the world, I know that all of it is conspiring for each one's greater good. And so I trust that as we move through this week with our eyes open, those spiritual eyes that can see the subtleties in life, I trust that each one sees the gift that has been presented to them, that has been offered to them graciously and with grace. And I trust that the revealing that happens, whatever revelation it is perfect for each one. And it is the perfect idea of as above, so below, as within, so outside of ourselves. That everything has a correspondence, and that each one has the ability to open their minds and keep their hearts open and surrender to a greater possibility of existence for each one personally and for our world. And I know this is how healing and revelation and greater good happens, and I trust that each one is open to it. And I know that this is indeed the movement of spirit through our lives, through our individuated lives and out into the world. And so I trust it with all my heart and all my mind and all my strength and all my soul. As I anchor this prayer for each one individually, prayer for the world, I anchor it in that same wholeness that I started it with. I give gratitude for it. I allow the law to just do what it does, correspond with this deeper belief of wholeness within each one. And we simply say, thank you, thank you, thank you, as we release this prayer, knowing the highest and best for each one by saying together, and so it is.